Hello, welcome to week 19 tutorial. And for this week, we have four conceptual problems to go through. And let's begin with question one. So question one asks you, with the advent of internet, digitalization, and related innovation, what fundamental aspects of the economy have changed? And which aspect will have remained the same? To answer this question, first we need to answer, what has internet brought to the market? What has the internet brought to the market? You can this question you can answer it from two aspects. But the major effect, or the overall effect, we will be focusing on describe how internet could affect communication, because internet is definitely a tool for us to make communication easier. You can now chat with anyone at any places, and you can use your smartphone connected to anything easily. So one aspect, so the central idea is that it help with communication. But there are two major factors, that's been two major sides that you need to analyze. One is from the consumer side, the other one is from the market side. So for the consumers, first for consumers, now consumer could be easily matched up with these sellers. That means easier for them to also meant easy for seller to advertise, and more option for consumers. So in a way, it's like an increase in demand for the entire market. So consumer could be easily matched up with the sellers. That's one aspect, and the other one is um from the market side, or the company side. So the market now has spawned a series of services that help uh, mm, the company to reduce its costs. Something to some example here, you could say, to how internet help company reducing costs. Now company because internet help us simplify the communication system. So whenever you need to communicate with your upper rank manager, or lower rank workers, you do not need to wait till the to message to deliver. Everything could be sent at ease, and that's in that could save a lot of time in terms of communication. And usually time means money, so in this way it's definitely reducing costs. And also, and development of internet does not only limit on the time of communication, it also increases how communication security has been before. Well, thinking about in the past, people can easily um, stop one message from one another, and other company could easily steal your information. But now, with a lot of development on security, hacking or simply stopping or interrupting or listening to other people's message becomes harder. So in a way, it's also saving, reducing risk for information being stolen, and it's a way to reduce its costs. And besides that, and after this, now you need to think about how this will combine together. But even though we mentioned that um, comes from the first point, consumer could be easily matched up with seller. It means definitely means increase in demand, which means increase in selling. If you simply drew the easy um, supply and demand graph and shift the demand curve to the right, you will see that definitely is increase in volume, in selling, the amount of selling. And the second point tells you it helps you reduce cost, but you should not note you should not simply conclude and increase in profit. Why is so? Why can we not conclude a increase in profitability? Because when internet becomes so much easier, it also intensify the competition within the market. Also now internet also intensified the competition within the market. Well, so in a way, because internet make information much more easier for most of people to access, which meant people now are easier to enter the market with less cost. Considering how you can simply set up a shop in Amazon instead of in the past you have to actually purchase a no, sorry, not purchase, maybe rent a physical place to start selling. Now with Amazon, you can just simply the only thing you need is the inventory, and you can start a business at home for selling simple toys, simple goods, the smaller ones. Then the traditional company who also sell the same toys, who also sell the same products will definitely facing a harder competition. And this kind of competition could easily drew the um, market price back to the original. If you back into our little graph over here, what's actually the entire market is facing is that there are more competitors coming in, and also the existing firm could compete harder with each other. In a way, they're actually increasing their output. So it's a change in supply. So supply now also be affected and it shift to the right. So supply shift to the right. So eventually, it's potentially possible that that the price of each product will go back to the original spot, and or it could be higher or it could be lower. You never know. But another thing we can assess is that the total volume of the entire market has increased. So total volume of trade has sorry has been increased, and cost of the and cost of products has been reduced. That's the two things we can conclude, but the overall effect is ambiguous. So I need to highlight this part. Oops, you should not. Did I erase that? Unfortunately, yes, note, you should not simply conclude on simply conclude on increasing profit, because internet also intensify the competition within the market. And from the previous 2 points, we concluded that the total volume of trade has been increased and cost of product has been reduced. And overall, due to the intensified market competition, the effect becomes ambiguous. So you cannot say for a single market, the entire market, or some simple or some single firm, the value has changed that much, because the effect is actually ambiguous in the case. So now we answer the most part of it, but it also needs to ask, that is just first major part of our entire question, and you also need to ask a second question: what kind of industry could be potentially be affected, and what others might not be affected? Well, in a way, it's summarizing. Is we are trying to see the point we mentioned above. How does what industry does the point we mentioned above fits in? So, what kind of industry could be affected? So, for this question, we are just simply trying to fit in any of the thing that I actually mentioned above. So, for any company that's heavily relied on internet these days, could be heavily affected. So, for example, finance industry is one of the industry that has been heavily uh, affected. And what else are there? You can say any industry that's not related, um, that's not uh, does not have to contain a physical form. So for now, entertainment is another one that does not need to be present physically. Um, entertainment. Um, just as I mentioned, entertainment is another um, heavy is another industry that has been affected heavily by the internet. And what else are there? Usually we since we mentioned Amazon, so you can also say small vendors. Small vendors could also be another target to be affected, because small vendor can now set up their shops online and starting selling stuff easily. But for large vendor, why is not possible? Because the investment in large vendor, each trade for large vendor could cost a lot. Consider if you are buying a car, that is quite a lot of transaction in your life. So you will not sell your stuff. So you will not sell your stuff. You will not try to. Sorry. as a consumer, you will not try to buy your car simply online. You would like to test your car a little bit, and you would like to ask some question to the salesman. That means you definitely need to present yourself in the car vendor store and communicate and test your products because the investment is large. You don't want to take the risk. But for small products, maybe for some pencils, for some nowadays popular stuff um, on Amazon, for example, daily subjects, daily use stuff, that those kind of small and cheap stuff you definitely purchase online. Those are relatively small investment, cost you roughly $20, $30, uh, which you do not actually feel like venturing to the physical store to purchase it. Those kind of things are something you would actually purchase online. And what other industry? Well, I really at this point I can't list any others. But then, so in conclusion, these three are uh, industry that could be potentially affected. Well, so just as I mentioned above, to conclude what I said, it was industry that does not industry that does not bounded industry that does not bounded by physical property or one that with homogeneous products. So homogeneous product, that means the products are as across the entire market, even with different branches. The product is definitely the product is in a way that it is the same. So some homogeneous products, such as if you're talking about homogeneous product, that would be for some people you can say the the energy drink well, the soft drink company, like Pepsi Cola versus Coca Cola, is there any difference? To some people there is not. So to them those are homogeneous products. This is a relative term to some people, but there could be other products that's entirely homogeneous to the entire population. But I couldn't think of any example at this case. But anyway, industry with homogeneous product, that means less risk to involve in. So that is something much more like small vendors I mentioned. And it also yeah, also something else to mention, insurance is one homogeneous product, because for buying insurance, the only differences for insurance is that it provides different kind of for different people it provides different risk and return rates for your personal insurance, whether that is health, whether that is a vehicle or any other insurance. But eventually, because the market is relatively transparent for insurance, so the calculation and the formula the company is using across firms are relatively the same. So eventually, each product in different firm will not have too much differences. except for the fact that some firm could offer a little bit more benefits to their customer. But the central idea of the products is the same. So insurance is another homogeneous product to mention, and insurance something nowadays people are relatively likely to purchase it online, and finish everything online. So that is one thing to mention. And answering these two questions could definitely answer the most aspects of our question. But then to close it up, you will need to answer which aspect has remained the same. So since we mentioned that industry that's not bounded by physical properties would be the one that's be affected, then what aspect then the last question, what aspects remain the same? So anything that's physically bounded, any aspect that is physically bounded will remain the same. What kind of what kind of thing could be there? You can say any skill trade or any like maintenance factors. So anything that's not related to communication could potentially remain the same. Some of them could be easier because of development of internet, making all the available tools and technology be easier to access. But deep down, if such a trade is physically related, that you have to make physical contact, or they have to do it in person, then it's definitely remaining unchanged. For example, like if you are for the restaurant owners, if you are for a chef especially, uh, development of internet does not change the does not change your behavior at all. The only thing it does change is to intensify the market. It might increase your standard for competition, and but the actual thing you are doing, you are just preparing meal for every single customer. Even though you could say online ordering is one thing, but then that is just that only change the delivering system of the industry, but it does not change the chef. It does not change how the kitchen operates. So for the restaurant, at least the chef part remains the same. So anything that has less to do with communication will remain the same. So for any physically bonded and or any aspect. Relying uh, communication remain the same. Okay. That basically closed out our question. And for this, for now, let's move on to question two. So welcome to question two. Question two says chain department stores such as Nordstrom or Macy's face conflicting pressure when making purchasing decision. A firm can benefit um, by centralizing purchasing decisions because it may get quantity discount. But achieving this economic requires that each store in the chain hold the same merchandise. And how can these firms solve the problem of coordinating to achieve scale economies while also tailoring each store's offerings to the taste of the specific customers? So for this question, it's definitely you can break it. You can break the entire store down to two different resources. Definitely, one part is what every single chain store could share, and the other part is what is local to the specific store. Uh, so basically, what I'm saying is that we can break the entire the cell of the store into two parts, and one is local, and the other part is global. So parts of the goods are global selling, and parts of the good are local to the customers. So for example, so one way to approach it, one way to approach is that all shared resources, all shared goods can be standardized to achieve economy discount for other goods, for other non shared resources. For other non-shared resources, we can allow, for all other non-shared resources, we can allow decentralized decision. Um, well, and now to explain why is this feasible is because for any non-shared resources that is the goods that's local to the customer. For any local goods, you need to consider the suitability of a global goods when entering the local market. So, for example, a pretty recent example is that after both Coca-Cola and Pepsi company has um, announced the ban for selling towards Russia. Russia make their own cola, and um, this is one of the over if considering such a penalization or such a ban will last longer, and Russian consumers will slowly adapt their own cola. Then at one day when the ban stopped, when the penalization stopped, when both the cola company wants to re-enter the Russian market, and the Russian consumer will no longer um, wants to consume these two um, globalized cola branch because they are much adapted to their own cola, to their own taste. So in that kind, if you are considering this, and also it's kind of like a patriot action to not buy foreign product for local for some local people. That's what potentially they could think about. And what's happening here is that um, the suitability of goods is playing a important roles. in the Nash equilibrium. Um, of the market structure. Well, patrialization is one thing, and also how how much a how much the local consumers taste uh fits with the globalized product is another thing. So, for example, different people in different country could definitely have a different taste. So, Chinese people might prefer Chinese food, and Western people prefer Western food. So in a way, you cannot globalize a food chain. So, even though if you actually look into McDonald's across the world, McDonald's does have a different products um, in different countries. Even in different region within a country, they could still produce a different taste products. But something are standardized that is like a French fries. That is something the global consumers will likely to consume, and they will not have any subjective idea. They will not have rejection on this simple food. But for others, for burgers, you might need to make some change. You might need to make some other developments, and that is something to mention. And it's definitely suitability against it's suitability that's playing a big role on deciding whether a good should follow decentralized decision, or should it follows the centralized decision that is globalized. So the example I'm giving was McDonald's providing different burgers in different countries, and that is good with low suitability across the global world. And but also you need to consider that sorry, McDonald doesn't have the A. My bad. And thank you. And McDonald's provides the same price in most countries. So the production of fries across many countries are the same. But if you actually go in deep down into the size of the cut, they could be slightly different. But then how they make it and how much like the ratio of how to season their fries remains the same. So fries is some goods with higher suitability. Goods with higher suitability. So goods with higher suitability are the ones that actually are the ones that could achieve economic discounts, but uh, burgers in the way we mention it, since it's different across countries, so it's a product that's less likely to achieve economic discount in a way that the fries has made, because they need to make different patties, they need to make different seasoning and different use different veggies, so the purchase could be different across different store. And in the sense, that is how the suitability plays a role in affecting chain department store um, chain department stores decision on whether to achieve scale economic or whether to decentralize their offering. And that will close question two. Well, so the central idea is to play suitability plays important role in the natural equilibrium of the market structure, also in the decision of the um, decision of the chain store. And yep, I think and that's McDonald's the example we gave, and I think that closed question two. So let's go on to question three. So for question three, it asks you how can you tell whether business owned by a firm are better off than they would be under different form of ownership. The answer to this question is you cannot. In the in my in the way that you cannot exactly know which ownership is better, is most beneficial for the given firm, because you can never observe the firm in two states. You cannot say you can only know the exact value of the firm under one ownership, and but for other ownership you can only predict how much value it could generate under other ownership. You can never observe the actual value. The market very is occasionally unpredictable. So in that kind of sense, some ownership could suffer more under different shocks. So one thing, the most important thing to mention, it is almost impossible to oh, it is not almost, it is impossible. It is impossible to observe how much a firm could worth under the alternative ownership. Well, for those who are familiar with econometric, then you will know why this is the case, because we can only observe one state, not the other ones, and as a result, it is impossible. It is hard to actually say how well the firm will perform if they change the ownership. But there are other approach that you can follow. It's a estimation. It's definitely not the exact value that you know about, and it's very much based on the market experience. And sometimes, if your firm is too specified, or your firm has any specific technology that might not work under different type of ownership, those kind of things will likely not be able to take in account into the evaluation. So the approach we mentioned here, one approach is that we can compare the before and after for other firms in the same industries. Well, so basically, we are taking other firms in the industry as example. as our comparing value. So we compare other how other firms change after um how other firms change in the same industry followed similar reconstruction. Well, compare the before and after for other firms in the same industry followed a similar restructuring. So what happened here is that we are taking other firms as any other firms in the same industry. You need to make sure it's in the same industry. So the suitability between our firm and the sampled firm are not too far away. Uh, well, so I'm making comparison before they're we are collecting a bunch of information and we are trying to estimate how much this kind of transformation could brought to our firm. And but also just as I mentioned, there could be, however, keep in mind, however, there could be some firm specific value that is not likely to be observed. Well, what that meant is, let's say, there could, let's say if, let's say firm A is purchased by a larger firm B because firm B think they could provide. It's more like a merging system. So firm B purchase firm A because they think they have a technology that can benefit firm A. But for your firm, let's say firm C, even firm B merge with you could create some values, but their technology might not apply to your firms. So the merging, the change of ownership, the change of operation might not actually benefit you as much as might not actually benefit firm C as much as firm A. So in a way, this absurd example might not actually apply to what exactly is happening to your firm. So you have to keep that in mind. And also in industry with localized product markets, comparison of different uh, ownership patterns across markets might also not be as effective as you expected. Well, in localized market, it could be from specific value. And from specific value, so the example we gave was that firm B merged with firm A. Firm A and introduce tech D to improve firm A. But the tech D might not benefit firm B as much as firm A. So in a way, it is the merging the change of ownership will not benefit firm B as much as firm A. It might still benefit firm B, but just not as much. And also, localized market could also let's say not intensify. Localized market could also change the structure localized market could also affect the prediction of the change of ownership. So what that meant, localized market, they will have specific customer, they will have specific reason that they could produce much more than any others. Well, so let's say examples we gave, hospitals, radio stations, and some specific alcohol production. They might need alcohol production. Some alcohol branch, they are producing their own alcohol and it tastes different from others because the location they are making will have specific moisture, they will have specific grains that they used, and those kind of thing could definitely affect the actual patterns across the entire market. It could be different from what the market could predict, because if you're considering the general value of the entire market might not actually be the same as this particular production. So in a way, every other production in the market could produce in their own way, or they will have a very specialized standard way of producing their products. But our company might have our company's own advantage. So that's one thing that we could once again refer back to the firm specific value and firm specific property that it has that does not that could not be explained, that could not be predicted by the market, because the market does not expose to this particular value as much as our company has been through, and that is a problem for our prediction. So at the end, it's hard to actually evaluate how the firm will perform under different ownership, because of the lack of information from the market, because the lack of method to actually observe our firm's value in different states. There is nothing called let's try to perform under different ownership, because changing different ownership costs a lot, and it could potentially damage the firm's value. So it's nothing that we can just like maybe take a 3-day trial or something like that. It's not going to happen. So it does not have a solid method to predict what the firm's value will become in under different form of ownership. And so that, I think, it closes up question 3. Now let's go to question 4. Okay, so now we are at question 4. And question 4 asks you, consumers often identify brand names with quality. Do you think branded products usually are higher quality than generic products and therefore justify their higher price? If so, why don't all generic products maker invest to establish brand identity, thereby enabling them to rise price? Um, so first thing to understand is what is a brand name? Well, brand name could be there are a lot of brand name that you can actually face in the entire market. For example, in the clothing industry, you can see uh, in Banana Republic, which has gone away, and Zara, which is some female focus sellers, and Babadon. And if I'm looking for some others, like big brands, Chanel, Coco Chanel, and Tiffany, and those kind of like fancy brands. So when I think about those fancy brands, you can see how they could cost a lot more than any other smaller branches. So basically, and the products is much more expensive, and they usually how where they establish their store are also much more expensive if you considering the locations and considering like all the decoration and stuff. So one thing to first thing to mention here is um store establishing store branch. Uh, so establishing branch name, just simply brand name. Brand names could be costly. Well, it requires a continuously invest. It requires continuous, sorry, my grammar, continuous. It requires continuous investment over a long period. Over a long period, before the brand name could be um, recognized or taking significant or bring significant effect. Significant effect. Even though you know, even though disregard all the fancy branch, even you considering how McDonald's has established their own brand name. Um, if you look, there is a movie about it. Actually, talk about how McDonald, uh, how the investor buy off the brand name from the brother McDonald and starting to make his own stuff, and that courses years. Eventually, he achieves success and that kind of story. But if you're considering how long he has spent on his path, on his way towards his success, how much he invests on the brand name McDonald's to make it big enough to and sound enough for the entire America or the entire global to recognize his branch, that is a lot to invest in terms of time and in terms of money. And it's hard to actually constantly invest in such amount of capital to make your brand name becomes recognized, becomes effective. And usually consumers think um, in the consumer's aspect, that since the firm has invested a lot into their brand name, into their development, brand name development. Well, since firm has invested a lot in their development, they would not risk a defected or low quality goods to damage their brand. So if you consider how much um, if you consider how much a, let's say, a food poison event, or years back a McDonald everyday worker discover or expose how dirty the ice cream machine has been in one of the McDonald branch, how much that could actually become, could damage the stock value of McDonald's, could damage the firm value of McDonald's. Uh, it's definitely not worth it for McDonald's to have the kind of things happening to them. So so that's the reason that the consumer think they will not risk those defective goods or any low quality products to damage their brand name, because the investment is a lot. So in other words, equivalently, or in other words, equivalently, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm losing the ability to spell it. Equivalently, also equivalently, the investment in a firm's brand name would work as a signal towards the consumer. Well, so what that meant, you just explain the same idea in other ways. So, the more you invest in your brand name, the more the consumer will trust, will trust will trust the product of your goods. So in terms of usually is consumers seems to be more sensitive with time instead of money investment. So when you are considering some 100-old branches, for example, U of T, has established itself for 100 years. So this kind of thing is something that you can actually put on board, can be put in front of everyone. It's more accessible to the consumer to observe there is a good signal, there's a positive signal for them to buying the products from the firm. For example, U of T, that's just I mentioned, because it's 100-year old and has so much investment in its physical products, and there is capital, that is how the way they educate their students. So it works as a signal towards the consumers, and that is something. And well, that's just from the aspects how establishing brand names could potentially let the consumers know um, the firm in general could produce higher quality goods than other firms. Uh, and and everything also always have the however side, which is the other not so clean side. Uh, Sorry, whatever. Also, when we mention however, there's always a truth to the story. That is, we are trying to answer the second part. Why don't all genetic products makers invest to establish brand identity, thereby enabling them to raise their price? However, um, mm, for some other products, well, so for some generic products, consumer. So whenever I say consumer, I always think about customer, so the two words just mixed together. So for some generic products, consumer more could be more price sensitive, price sensitive than uh, quality sensitive. Well, the story is as following. If you're considering shopping in a wholesale store and you're looking at two brands of milk, and because you're definitely not a expert in chemistry, or you're not an expert in the farming industry, so you have no idea how these two farms create their daily products, their milks. But the only thing you can observe is one milk is expensive than the other. But to you, um, you might taste no difference between these two milk, and as the result, you might actually choose the one with lower price. Or if you do taste slightly different, then you might choose the higher. You might choose the more expensive one. But we are talking about consumer that is more price sensitive than quality sensitive. So it's just general person that is not likely to taste the differences between the two milks. So you would likely to choose the one with lower price, and as a result, investing in brand name in such an industry might not work as good as you think in other industry. Well, and so in a way, consumer could be more price sensitive than quality sensitive. Hence, it is hard to transfer the cost of establishing the brand name, transfer the cost of the brand names to the consumer. And that is the major reason why consumers uh there's a major reason why it is not feasible for all brands to establish their brand name, because the investment, you might have to bear the investment yourself, and as a result, the profit margin might be cut. there's a higher cost for your own products, but you cannot sell your product at a higher price. Usually, if you consider any competitive market, there isn't much people to openly or to actively establish their brand name. Maybe eventually some brands might sound louder than others because they actually have slightly higher product goods, or they just in a way they could make their goods a little bit more outstand well outstand than other goods in the same markets. But deep down they just all seem the same. So the price are relatively close if you're considering the price of pencil. Uh, Disregard all those fancy sketching pencils. Most of the pencils sell the same price. And in that kind of sense, you will not see, you should just see a yellow and black outlayer or simply a green outlayer, sorry, a green coating or a yellow or black coatings on your pencil. But there is nothing like a shiny brand names on it or anything else. Well, there's something um, that is signaling that establishing a brand name in such an industry is not so worthy. Consumer in this industry are more price sensitive than quality sensitive. Well, and also establishing a brand identity is less attractive to seller of such goods, and that is wow. Uh, just let me put it down first. Uh, Also establishing how to transfer the cost to the consumer. As a result, also establishing brand name is less attractive to sell off such goods or goods that can be established at the time of sale. Well, since consumer ascertain the quality of goods that product directly, and signals of quality are not necessary. Well, if we're giving an example, that will be well, if you go to maybe some night market and stuff, and you see you see there are people making food, then those foods are you they definitely do not invest a lot in making their brand name loud or sound, and but it's because the the quality of the products. Sorry. Yes, the quality of product can be assessed when the product comes out, which meant there is establishing the brand name becomes unnecessary because because every day they have different product quality and stuff like that, and well, for such goods, theoretically speaking, a consumer should not be paying a premium for the brand for such good because brand name does not confer any additional information. Establishing goods. It's because consumers could access to the quality of goods directly at the moment of purchasing, or even before purchasing. Well, well, so that is well, that's like buying stuff from the vendor store. Buying stuff from the night market. So when you purchase stuff, you can actually examine the goods right in front of the sellers, and you can touch it, you can feel it, and sometimes they even offer you for those kind of food store, they even offer you those kind of like tasting they can free tasting samples, so you can definitely assess the quality of goods before purchasing, and that is why establishing a brand name might not work. It's not as valuable as it sounds. And also sometimes this kind of stores, the time length or the age of the store is usually very young, and it does not last long. So establishing a brand name needs it's usually for those store that is more consistent, like consistently existing, so it lasts longer. So it can benefit the company longer. So in this kind of sense, just as I mentioned, consumer could assess the quality of good directly at the moment of purchase. Um, there is now there's no benefit for signaling. So the essential idea for establishing a brand name is signaling. So you're telling a consumer your product is better than the other. But in some scenario, when signaling is not necessary, then well, it is not worthy to establish your brand. And also, um, because consumer can access to good quality directly, they would not pay additional premium for the product. Well, that is also here is also once again it's mentioning because consumer can not can assess the good of quality directly. It's hard to transfer the cost of establishing a brand name to the customer. So in a way, um, it's not worthy for this kind of search group firms to establish their brand name. And that closed question 4 and also closed up our entire tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do have question, please email me. Thank you.